The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6 is Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, a woke attack on our greatest Britain. St Paul's Cathedral exposed for branding Winston Churchill a white supremacist on its website. Churchill's family have hit back, but it's not the first time they've been forced to defend Britain's wartime hero from the left's revolting attacks.
My grandfather was a very human being. He was a child of his generation. He made some absolute howlers. But at the end of the day, it is possibly the greatest record of any living, of any Englishman of the last 200 years.
I'll explain why we must defend our history and heroes against the Britain-hating left in my digest next. Then my superstar panel weigh-in. Tonight, making her debut, former Conservative Education Minister Dame Andrea Jenkins. And she's alongside Benjamin Butterworth and Belinda de Lucy. Also coming up, as a damning Wall Street Journal expose reveals the gory details of the Sussexes Hollywood flop, including a humiliating megastar snub for Meghan's podcast, has the toxic couple's American dream become a nightmare? My royal masterminds, Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier, weigh in. Plus, while Harry's Hollywood career flops, our future king is continuing to serve his country by launching a major homelessness project.
This will inspire belief throughout the UK and beyond that homelessness can be ended for good.
So, very simple question for you tonight. Who is doing more for public service? Prince Harry or Prince William? Niall Gardner, Cara Kennedy and Denise Headley duke it out in the clash. Elsewhere tonight, the inquest into Nicola Bulley's tragic death today found she drowned, but was alive and sober when she fell into the water. So, do Lancashire Police still have some serious questions to answer over its handling of her disappearance? Former top detective turned investigative journalist Mark Williams-Thomas, who was at the inquest today, delivers his expert verdict. As ITV bosses consider replacing Philip Schofield with a woman on Dancing on Ice, is former Strictly star James Jordan right to warn that we're, quote, going to see no white heterosexual men on television anymore? Fleet Street icon Calvin McKenzie, pretty sure he ticks all of those boxes, gives his unfiltered take. Also on the way, why on earth is a Conservative cult secretary lobbying for James Bond to become a woman?
Is it time for a female James Bond?
Always time for females to lead in film and more broadly.
Man of the people Charlie Lawson gives his no-nonsense take on that and more of the day's most outrageous stories later this hour. Plus, scheming Sturgeon's legacy of divisive politics continues to thrive within the SNP.
I am originally, as you might be able to tell, from that place. I'm English by birth, I'm Scottish by choice.
I'll show you more from the shambolic separatist conference, including Humza Useless's hilarious confrontation with the protester that didn't go well. That's in the media buzz. Tomorrow's front page is on the way too. Hot off the press, a new Greatest Britain Union jackass as well. This is Dan Wootton tonight. Let's go. You're watching GB News, Britain's news channel. My blood is absolutely boiling about this attempt to destroy the reputation of Churchill. I'll tell you exactly what's going on straight after the news headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Dan, thank you. Good evening. The top story on GB News tonight is that the Russian President Vladimir Putin says the organisers of an attempted military coup at the weekend will be brought to justice. In a televised address within the last hour, President Putin thanked the Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko for his peaceful solution. The Kremlin leader blamed the West for the rebellion, saying it wanted Russian soldiers to kill each other. And that comes after the head of the Wagner mercenary group says he didn't want to overthrow Putin. Yevgeny Prigozhin saying earlier that his progress of his troops highlighted serious security problems in the country. Well, here, the Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, has said the rebellion has shown the world that Russia is not as strong as previously thought.
Prigozhin's rebellion is an unprecedented challenge to President Putin's authority, and it is clear that cracks are emerging in the Russian support for the war. I, of course, hold no candle for Prigozhin or his forces. They have committed atrocities in Ukraine and elsewhere, but he has said out loud what we have believed since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion, that this invasion was both unjustified and unprovoked.
Well, in the United States, President Joe Biden said the Western allies must continue to work together to assess the situation.
The ultimate outcome of all this remains to be seen. But no matter what comes next, I will keep making sure that our allies and our partners are closely aligned in how we are reading and responding to the situation. It's important we stay completely coordinated.
Now, news away from Russia. Apparently, it cost nearly £170,000 to send a migrant to Rwanda. That's according to the Home Office's own figures. The government says nearly 37% of people would need to be deterred from crossing the English Channel in small boats for the illegal migration bill to break even. Their assessment also warns that if the current trends continue without reducing hotel usage, the asylum system could cost £32 million a day by the end of 2026. Now, an inquest has been hearing today how Nicola Bulley died as a result of drowning and that there was no evidence that she had been harmed. The mother of two disappeared in January whilst out walking her dog along the River Wyre in Lancashire. Her body was found 3 weeks later. A Home Office pathologist told the inquest she hadn't been drinking before her death. Other experts have also been giving evidence today, saying the river was just 4 degrees, almost freezing, and inhaling just 2 breaths of water would have been lethal. Lastly, the Prince of Wales has launched an initiative today aimed at ending homelessness. Prince William's 5-year project, called Homewards, aims to make rough sleeping a thing of the past. Initially focusing on 6 locations, local businesses will be asked to develop their action plans with up to £500,000 in funding available. On TV, online, DAB+ radio and the TuneIn app. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
The left in this country will not rest until they have destroyed the reputation and trampled over the legacy of the man who usually wins public polls to be named our greatest Briton of all time. St Paul's Cathedral, the church that hosted Sir Winston Churchill's state funeral in 1965, spent the past year describing the man who defeated Hitler and saved the West from the fascist Nazis as, quote, an unashamed imperialist and white supremacist. The revolting and highly derogatory descriptions appeared on the St Paul's official website. They were only changed after the Mail on Sunday newspaper raised the alarm. So the website now reads, he is also a figure of controversy, especially when viewed from a modern perspective. This is not an isolated incident. The woke-washing of Churchill is part of a deranged left-wing campaign sparked by the Black Lives Matter movement to trash the man who saved England. Sir Winston's grandson, Nicola Soames, slammed the comments by St Paul's as thoughtless, stupid and ignorant, raging, even for allowances of some of the sort of more extreme views in the Church of England, this is really going too far. It was deeply offensive and caused great offence to a number of members of my family, and representatives were made by a number of people. He's right. We must stop judging historic figures by the impossibly woke standards of today. And the revisionist mob are wrong to leap on Churchill's approach to the Indian famine in 1943 as proof of his racism, given many historians agree he did his best to be fair at a time when supplies across the world were beyond scarce. Now, Churchill is a hero who helped prevent the extermination of Jews and many other minorities from the face of this earth.
My grandfather was a very human being. He was a child of his generation. He made some absolute howlers. But at the end of the day, it is possibly the greatest record of any living, of any Englishman of the last 200 years.
You've got a situation in which the statue of Winston Churchill, who is a national hero, has had to be boarded up for fear of violent attack. And that, to me, is both absurd and wrong.
Was Churchill a racist?
No, he wasn't. The fact that he put his life on the line endlessly to defend non-white people, overall he was a tremendously good thing for non-whites, and he wouldn't have been if he was a racist.
I have nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears and sweat, and I say, come then, let us go forward together with our united strength.
That makes you proud to be British, doesn't it? But the woke left hate Britain. Their incessant bid to deride the impact of Churchill proves that. So we must stand up for our history, heritage and our heroes, or nothing is left. But to respond now, my superstar panel making her debut, the Conservative MP, former Education Minister under Boris Johnson, Dame Andrea Jenkins, the journalist and broadcaster Benjamin Butterworth, and the former Brexit Party MEP Belinda de Lucy. Belinda, this is indicative, isn't it, of a woke washing of our greatest Britain. And actually, even more than that, a desire to do down all of the brilliant achievements the British Empire made, including throughout the 20th century.
Oh, absolutely. A poll was done by Policy Exchange last year, and it said that only 1 in 5 18 to 25-year-olds saw Churchill in a positive light. This is happening in our schools and universities where the majority of teachers and professors are left-wing, and left-wingers want us to hate the country as much as they do. They want us to hate our culture, our identity, our history, our heroes, because that way they can divide us and they can demoralise us so that we can go into their sort of morbid, depressing Hatesville, Arizona of a life where they just want everyone to be poor and everyone to be hateful. And what's worse about the left is they make all the woes of the world a uniquely white British sin. And there's a total double standards. They don't go to Nelson Mandela, who's accused of womanising and wife-beating, or Martin Luther King, who's been accused of homophobia, or Gandhi, who's been accused of racism. They don't target them. They will only target white English or British men, because this is part of an anti-white, race-baiting rhetoric narrative of the left that they're using to divide people, and we should be uniting in celebration of the man who defeated fascism.
What incredible points. I could not agree more, Belinda. And I think what's so shocking, Dame Andrea Jenkins, about this example is that this is St Paul's Cathedral. This is the church that hosted the great man's state funeral. What were they thinking?
I'm sure he'd be turning in his grave, Dan. I mean, look, let's not forget that Churchill helped save the Western world from the clutches of Nazi Germany. And it's just appalling. It shows the wokery of them. And as you said, he ranks as one of the greatest Britons. I mean, I'd like to see every Conservative MP and the Prime Minister stand up against this.
Which Boris Johnson
completely did
when they came for his hero, Churchill.
Oh, completely. And we want as many people as possible, you know, actually standing up for common sense as well. Because this is, I mean, Churchill was amazing. I mean, I'm sure you remember learning about him at school, Belinda. Yes. And it makes you feel proud to be British.
Absolutely.
And that's not in our schools
and by
anymore.
the way, the people who use the Bengal famine to try and say this was categorical proof that Churchill hated the Indian people, Benjamin Butterworth, I put it to you, they are being highly intellectually dishonest.
I mean, look, it sounds to me, first of all, the idea this undermined his legacy is basically absurd, because nobody noticed for a whole year. I don't think the St Paul's Cathedral website is the most significant document in the country.
But isn't that more about that people are not going on that website rather than...
But, I mean, it shows that it really wasn't that significant. And look, you know, nearly 4 million people...
Do you not understand? This is about the principle of the matter.
Look, I think what they've described him as clearly a war hero, but also a highly controversial figure in other ways. That's what Sir Nicholas Soames was basically saying in the clip you used. He said he made, quote-unquote, many howlers. And I think it's important that you don't try and pretend that these figures were 2D, that they did only great things. I think that is rewriting history.
What about what Belinda said, though? Where's the historic revision of Mandela or Gandhi or Martin Luther King? Your folk don't go anywhere near historical figures unless they are white and British.
I mean, it would be perfectly logical that people in Britain are more bothered about British figures because they have affected us. They've affected the fabric of our society. Now, look, clearly it's not a complete secret if Belinda's aware of it. I wasn't aware of all the details of what she did, so, you know, clearly it's not some woke conspiracy as you'd like to make out.
No, but I think it undermines the fight for freedom as well. Let's not forget what he did.
When the British government wanted to compromise with Hitler, it was only Churchill and his stubbornness and his patriotism that told the British government, don't you dare.
And it's so telling, Benjamin, that you want to focus on the so-called bad things he did. We could be all doing Nazi salutes every time we walk into the office if it wasn't for this bloke.
Well, I mean...
The Jewish religion may not exist if it wasn't for this bloke. Why don't you want to celebrate that?
But, I mean, that's perfectly reasonable to celebrate that, but
you're not.
But it is ridiculous, this argument you try to make, that somehow none of these people did anything bad. You often talk...
when you talk about... Do you think he was a racist?
When you talk about... I'm not going to say that because I'm not a historian and you'd love me to say it because then you could just scream at me. Look, the truth is that these people are complicated and you want to take that away. Real students of history don't tell the story you tell. They tell a much more nuanced story. Sir Nicholas Soames' grandson, I think he knows better than...
We can't have heroes anymore. We can't have any heroes. It's all of our heroes down with all of their small
No one is saying Churchill was perfect. All heroes of democracy are flawed. That's just in the nature.
So why can't we discuss that?
Let me finish. But there is an active drive now and campaign to pick out white old men, male, pale and stale, like the BBC in Wales described us. A lot of anti-white narrative going on, and it's double standards. Look at the church. They self-flagellate all the time about their links to slavery. No one mentions Islam. No one mentions that in Islamic countries slavery was there long before the Atlantic slave trade. Saudi Arabia only abolished slavery in 1962. Slavery has to be taught just like war does on a global scale, not just picking out white people as a uniquely sinful colour or race.
And that's a fair point, isn't it, Andrea, to raise the Church of England, because we know that St Paul's falls under this woke umbrella that the Church of England is increasingly pushing, and they're actually becoming so out of touch with their parishioners.
Well, I actually had to call out one of my local vicars who was constantly trolling me. He was actually tweeting the likes of Corbyn. But his Twitter account was literally set up just to troll me, and and he's going there speaking to parishioners.
I mean, I think we should be proud of how the Church of England has changed.
Me too.
You know, it was a collapsing organisation. It's had massively falling footfall, and they're trying to be in touch with a new generation.
I don't think getting political is the right way.
Touched by describing Winston Churchill as a white supremacist. I'm sorry.
But also, I mean, tomorrow in Parliament we've got the Christine prayer breakfast, which is wonderful, and I've got my local vicar in my village down, and he's amazing. But I think it's actually giving the Church of England a bad name.
It is this woke washing that's going on. Just a quick one. Winston Churchill, our greatest Briton, Andrea Jenkins?
Oh, completely. Yeah.
Belinda Lucy?
Without a shadow of a doubt.
Benjamin
Well, I think it would be Queen Elizabeth, I'm afraid.
OK. I can't argue with that choice.
No, absolutely.
But of course it's not Churchill from the Woke-topian on the panel, Benjamin Butterworth, alongside Dame Andrea Jenkins and Belinda Lucy, my superstar panel with me all night, but also on the way. As Culture Secretary Lucy Fraser suggests it's time for a woman to be James Bond, should a Conservative Culture Secretary really be making these woke suggestions? Man of the people, Charlie Lawson, he's furious about that. You don't want to miss him. But first in the clash, as the future king launches a major homelessness project while his brother's Hollywood career is in tatters, who's actually doing more for public service? Is it Prince Harry or Prince William? Simple question tonight. Former advisor to Margaret Thatcher, Niall Gardner, Spectator writer Cara Kennedy and the broadcaster Denise Headley will debate it next. But I want to know what you think. Dan at gbnews.com. Vote in our poll at GBNews on Twitter. Who is doing the most for the good of this country, William or Harry? We're back debating that straight after the break.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel. My royal masterminds are Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier on the way this hour. But first, the clash. And Prince William has unveiled ambitious plans to end homelessness in Britain as he announced his new Homewards programme, which aims to put 6 pilot locations on a path to ending homelessness within 5 years.
What does home mean to you? I don't believe it needs to be this way.
I'm pleased to stand here today at the start of our path to ending homelessness. Over the next 5 years, we have a unique opportunity to develop innovative new solutions and scale their tangible impact. This will inspire belief throughout the UK and beyond that homelessness can be ended for good.
After being introduced to the plight of the homeless by his late mother Diana, Wills has kept the cause close to his heart, while younger brother Prince Harry has been spotted serving himself in recent times, seeming to forget his own statement made after running away to the States, which promised we can all live a life of service. Service is universal. So very simple question for you tonight. As the future king launches this major homelessness project while his brother's Hollywood career flops, who's actually doing more for public service, William or Harry? Well, let's debate this now. I'm joined by US-based political commentator Niall Gardner of the Heritage Foundation, top reporter, scoop breaker on royal matters at The Spectator, Cara Kennedy, and host of the Headley Highlight Show, Denise Headley. So, Niall Gardner, who do you reckon? Who's doing more for public service, Harry or William? Because Harry spoke a really good game, didn't he, before he left for the US?
Well, Dan, thanks very much for having me on the show tonight. And, you know, without a doubt, I think that Prince William exemplifies a true heart of service here. And the work he's doing with regard to eradicating homelessness, I think is hugely admirable. It speaks great volumes about his character and his tremendous work ethic as well, and his sense of service to his country, to the Crown and to the British people. In contrast, I think with Prince Harry just exemplifies narcissism, selfishness. It's all about Harry and Meghan for Prince Harry. Harry's into serving himself rather than serving the Crown or serving some higher purpose here. And there is a huge contrast between Prince William, an immensely humble individual with a true heart, I think, of selflessness, and Prince Harry with his vanity and narcissism. And it's a tragedy. I'm watching the decline and fall of Prince Harry. Really is absolutely stunning, and such a contrast with the tremendous heart of service and the tremendous spirit that Prince William has.
Denise Headley, you disagree though. You think Harry is doing more for public service than William?
I think it's important to, one, not necessarily view the contributions as a competition. William is a working royal, and his main function when is charitable work. So of course he's going to be doing particular types of work. And in relation to the programme, I think it's a bit light on the detail. In terms of a gesture as addressing housing, it's an important thing to do. But I would be very keen to see what the role is going to be for planning. Is it going to be expedited? And what it's going to be in terms of affordable homes? Because that is the real key. And the Prince really has significant sums of money and significant lands. He could eradicate housing out of his own personal pocket if he chose to. However, he's going along this route. So I think we need to look at it on its merit.
OK, so you've got question marks about the William homelessness project, which I think is fair enough. What has Harry done to contribute to public service, Denise, over the past 3 years?
I think you need to look at the role of the Archwell Foundation, the things that they have been addressing in terms of misinformation, in terms of diversity, in terms of the work that he does with the Invictus program, supporting veterans and mental health. So if we're going to look at him outside of the working royal function as a person who is actually addressing concerns of a social nature, I think him and his wife have been exemplary, in my opinion.
OK, Cara Kennedy, where do you stand?
I mean, if it's a competition between Harry and William in terms of their charity endeavours, you've got to say that Harry's the loser. I've been following Archewell since its inception in 2020, and to be honest, Dan, I'm still pretty perplexed on what it is and what it does. They've raised 13 million. They've given away 3 million. Who knows what the rest of the money is doing? But I will say that with Homewood's, you said it was ambitious. Ambitious is, to say the least of it. William uses very hyperbolic language in the video. He says it's possible to end homelessness here, not only end it, but within 5 years. I mean, he's opened himself up to a lot of scrutiny here, and it will mean him wading in on heavily political issues, not only the causes of homelessness, which is people failed by mental health services, women escaping violence, etc., but the solutions are very polarising policy areas such as housing reform, which is such a big issue in this country, especially in London. So it will be interesting to see the solutions that he comes up with.
Yeah. Oh yes, come on, Denise.
If you're questioning the what happened to the Archewell Foundation funds, you could avail yourself of the accounts. So that, you know, to suggest somehow there's some sort of issue there, I think that was grossly unfair and a bit of a cheap shot on your part.
Well, they haven't done much, Denise. Denise, let's be honest. Come on.
No, but
they've spent the past 3 years lining their own pockets, right, to pay for a big mansion in Montecito.
You know, address that.
OK, no, fair enough. You've addressed it, and I think that's important. But I would say, Denise, they have spent the bulk of the past 3 years attempting to line their pockets. They're all about the greenback. They're all about the moolah for themselves.
And if you look at how much money is actually being given in the Cornwall estate, the Duchy of Cornwall estate, that grossly takes over from what Harry and Meghan have done, and that's actually a lot of that comes from the public purse and the sovereign grant. So it's not, you're not making a comparison with like.
OK, fair enough. Niall Gardner, can you weigh in on a couple of these points? Because isn't Cara fair to say this is risky territory for William? I mean, look, it's bold, it's risky, it's audacious. But Niall, could you not argue this was maybe the sort of project that actually Harry could have taken on in his role outside of the royal family? Is it not risky for William, as the heir to the throne, the next in line to the throne, to be involving himself in issues which are so clearly political? I mean, that's made clear by the fact that he's met, for example, the Housing Secretary to discuss this and the Leader of the Opposition.
Well, I would say I think William is a good-hearted person here. Clearly, this is ambitious, this is bold, but this project is a worthy project. It is worthy of a future king, and I think there's a huge difference in character between William and Harry. And I think that William really is dedicating his life to serving the British people, and that is admirable. In contrast, Harry is all about profit, basically, for himself and for Meghan. And there's a fundamental difference in character between William and Harry. And so we should admire, I think, what William is trying to achieve here. And in sharp contrast, I think Harry's path that he has taken is immensely destructive, self-serving, and ultimately, I think, hugely counterproductive.
OK, great debate. Niall Gardner, Cara Kennedy, Denise Headley, we'll speak to you all soon. Thank you both so much. But who do you agree with here? Who's doing more for public service? Prince William or Prince Harry? Grace via Twitter writes to me, I believe Prince William is everything Harry aspires to be. There is a lot of jealousy here, and I feel that is partly what has driven Harry's recent actions. From Lodger on Twitter, you've forgotten to acknowledge that Prince Harry was heavily involved with the Invictus Games and other initiatives. So he has been both productive and proactive. Look, what I would say to that is it's been a very long time, hasn't it? He did all of his good works of public service while he was a member of the royal family. And from Diane, this is also via Twitter, Harry will be seething that his brother is doing something that was close to Diana's heart, although it wouldn't cross his mind to do this himself, as there is no fast buck to be made. Your verdict's now in. 84% of you say Prince William is doing more for public service. 16% of you backing Prince Harry. Now, coming up, as a damning Wall Street Journal expose reveals the humiliating details of the Sussexes Hollywood flop, including a snub from a megastar for Meghan's podcast. Has the runaway couple's American dream just become a nightmare? My royal masterminds, Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier, both weigh in shortly. But next, why is a Conservative culture secretary calling for James Bond to become a woman? Lucy Fraser echoed Keir Starmer with that woke suggestion, and man of the people Charlie Lawson is fired up and ready to give his unflinching take straight after this. Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Our royal masterminds, Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier, coming up on those extraordinary Hollywood revelations about the Sussexes. But first, our man of the people, Charlie Lawson. And according to the Culture Secretary, Lucy Fraser, it's time for a woman to become James Bond, Charlie? Look at this.
Is it time for a female James Bond?
Always time for females to lead in film and more broadly.
Charlie Lawson, I could not understand why a Conservative minister is lobbying on behalf of the Woke Brigade. I mean, this is something I criticised when Keir Starmer suggested, but what is a Tory doing saying that James Bond should become Jenny Bond?
Yeah. Well, I think she's put her foot in it here, and let me tell you why, Daniel. Listen, I not only have the joined Let Women Speak movement or whatever. I'm all for pushing actresses and all that lot. This would be a terrible disservice to any actress because it's Mrs. Broccoli or Miss Broccoli or whatever hasn't. It just wouldn't work. And I'll tell you. We have enough great screenwriters who happen to be female. They should be writing their own separate movie script, a new franchise, if they want to do that, so you can get a quality series of great actresses. And we have plenty of MI6 agents all around the planet working now who are female, undercover, and all the rest of it. So that's the way she'd go. I think she's made an error. Apart from the fact that James Bond was created by Ian Fleming as the flamboyant sort of character that he has become to greater or lesser degrees. I mean, I thought Roger Moore, God bless him, played golf with him, but I thought I didn't like his performance. We all like Sean's performance. Daniel Craig, I thought, was by far the best because I think he gave it something. But James Bond is a man, darling, and I'm afraid there's nothing you can do about it. Tell Mrs. Broccoli to go and get those great script writers that happen to be women and write a proper film franchise for some damn good, fine actresses. But leave James alone, for God's sake.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. Now, look, Charlie, as we know, patience wearing thin for the eco-terrorists at Just Stop Oil. It was beautifully demonstrated by this motorcyclist in London earlier today. I mean, God knows why they look shocked, by the way, at that happening. But the group has become so extreme that they've even lost the support of their American founder, Trevor Nielsen, who tapped up his billionaire mates to bankroll climate disruption across London and Europe, giving birth to menacing groups like Just Stop Oil and XR. Now the entrepreneur says his band of middle-class jobs have lost the plot, telling The Times it's become disruption for the sake of disruption. Working people that are trying to get to their job, get their kid dropped off at school, survive a brutal cost of living crisis in the UK. It does not encourage them to join the movement. I absolutely believe that it has now become counterproductive. I mean, it's sad, Charlie, isn't it, that it took this bloke so long to realise that. But when your founder is turning on you, surely you know that's when you've lost. They need to give up.
Well, they are complete pain in the arses. I only wish they'd turn up in my village, I'll tell you that. But I mean, they intensely annoy me, so they do, because we've seen them interviewed, and thank God the general public are getting out of their cars and giving them what for and telling them to do you know what and go home, because I can't see. I think the only people who support them are the people who participate in this friggin' nonsense. And interestingly enough, I saw a police officer who, blow me, looked like a big strapping police officer reading them the Riot Act the other day, and I thought, well,
I love that.
It's just a shame that they. It's not as if these people are doing a hit and run. They're walking along at 1 mile an hour. The police have got ample opportunity to catch up with them. It's not as if they're running, you know. So we want the police to step up now and back up the people who are getting out of their cars and the scaffolders and all the rest of it, and the lovely woman who threw a bucket of you-know-what out the window from the flat in Camden. More power to their elbow as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, we're fighting back. We're fighting back. And I just want to say what I always say to the Just Stop Oil goons: if you're standing in the middle of a road, don't be surprised when you nearly get hit by a vehicle. One day you're going to cause a tragedy. Stop now.
Yeah, let's just hope, Dan, that and I would be an advocate of the public taking action. But what we don't need to happen is some guy getting very pissed off and getting out and lamping one of them.
But it's going to happen.
We don't need that to happen.
It's going to happen. It's going to happen because they are ruining lives. They are stopping people getting to school. They're stopping people getting to their hospital appointments. They actually make me physically sick. But look, Charlie, I just needed to get your take on the story that we kicked off the show with. This post on the website of St Paul's Cathedral describing probably the greatest ever Briton, Sir Winston Churchill, as a white supremacist. Now, this is St Paul's, Charlie, which was the venue of Churchill's state funeral in 1965. Can you believe what is happening to our country, Charlie, when you see this?
Well, first of all, it's not very often I would agree with young Benjamin, but this has been around for a year, so it clearly nobody reads their bloody magazine in the first place. But no, it's an absolute disgrace. I wouldn't, Mr. Soames wouldn't be one of my favourite politicians or ex-politicians, but Winston Churchill was a man's a man for all that, as Robbie Burns would say, and he had his errors and all the rest of it, and I don't think for 1 minute he was racist or white supremacist. Go back into St. Paul's, get your frock on, get on your knees and do your job, and leave all the rest of the politics and whatever to the people the journalists or anybody who want to express your opinion. Welby started all this off 2 months ago. And I said to him then, shut up, get on your knees, start travelling around the beautiful country of England and visiting the poor parishioners and the poor parish churches who are clinging on by a thread. Stop whinging on about building refugee, illegal immigrants' homes and all this. Now, dish out some of your bloody money to the parish churches around England that are hanging on by a thread.
Hear, hear, well put. Charlie Lawson, our man of the people. Great to speak, Charlie. We'll speak soon. But coming up, as a Scottish pupil tells teachers they now identify as a fox. Amid warnings from union leaders that schools are a toxic environment for them, is it time for the government to fight harder against sexual extremism in our classrooms? My superstar panel return to debate that shortly. But next, as a damning Wall Street Journal expose shines the light on the Sussexes Hollywood flop, including a snub from a pop sensation for Meghan's podcast, will big brands like Spotify now just shun the couple for good? My Royal Masterminds, Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier, with their exclusive insight in mere moments.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But bomb.
And action.
Sergeant Reed, my superstar panel, they're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News. Britain's watching.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Now, the extent of the Sussexes' stateside flop has been laid bare by a damning Wall Street Journal expose. According to the respected newspaper, pop sensation Taylor Swift snubbed a handwritten invite from Meghan Markle to appear on her dire podcast Archetypes through a representative. Further explosive details of the runaway couple's disastrous 3 years in Hollywood include Archewell struggling to make good on all of the terms of the Spotify deal, with Harry in particular finding it difficult to land on a podcast idea. Executives at Netflix furious at Archewell's lack of output and feeling that the success of the Harry and Meghan documentary is all the company has to show for the deal. Employees at Archewell complaining the company often lacks direction, with Harry and Meghan seemingly surprised by the work required to finish entertainment products. So, Lady C, this has been a catastrophic weekend for the Sussexes, because not only has it been revealed by the Wall Street Journal that they are clueless and that they have no ideas about how to make entertainment products, and that they have been snubbed by Taylor Swift, who didn't even bother to reply to Meghan's handwritten note. She got her PR to do it for her. But also they've been shown once more to be work-shy and lazy.
Well, of course, Dan, the reality is they have nothing to offer except royal status. And they have trashed the royals and they have trashed royal status. What do they have to offer? They are two losers who have exposed themselves as being unimaginative, inadequate losers. And everybody knows it now. You know, I mean, there's nowhere for them to go except to maybe one of the 16 lavatory bowls that they have in their Montecito house.
Yeah, but how are they going to keep affording to pay for those bathrooms, Phil Dampier? Because, look, anyone who is thinking about signing a deal with the Sussexes is going to read this Wall Street Journal piece, and if I were them, I'd say, save my millions. Why waste your millions on someone who isn't prepared to do the work?
Yeah, good evening, Dan. Just reading that they reckon that they could lose up to $40 million if they don't get any more contracts. I was just looking online tonight. There's a guy called Jeremy Zimmer, quite a very well-known Hollywood talent agent, and I think he sums it up best. He says, just because you're famous, it doesn't mean you're great at something, you know, and I think they've just been found out. As you said, they're work shy. They haven't got any great ideas. They haven't really got any great projects coming up. Apparently, they want to do something, a spin-off from Charles Dickens's Great Expectations. I'm not quite sure if we have great expectations for that taking off. But it's amazing once you get a momentum going, people like Taylor Swift pulling out, then other people start to think they don't want to be associated with failure. And so it goes on. So once it starts heading in that direction, it's very difficult to get the momentum back again.
Yeah, it's a woke version of Great Expectations, by the way, so I think it's going to be total rubbish. And from what I'm told, Netflix don't want anything to do with these guys once the contract is over, and I know Lady C had heard the same thing last week. But look, those damning details weren't the only blow to the couple's reputation this weekend, though, because a bombshell Bloomberg report also revealed Prince Harry demanded an interview with Vladimir Putin, Donald Trump and Mark Zuckerberg for a Spotify podcast series, but the deluded Duke's grand plan which involved asking the Russian despot about his childhood trauma, was quickly quashed. The report also revealed producers were left scratching their head after hapless Harry pitched one crazed idea to interview Pope Francis on religion. The Sussexes' £15 million deal with Spotify was subsequently axed, with the Duke failing to produce any podcasts. Lady C, Harry wanted to interview Putin? I mean, what's this about?
Well, obviously Harry wants to be breakfast. I mean, Putin would have eaten him alive. Actually, it would have been a wonderfully entertaining broadcast, you know, and somebody would have got rid of at least one of that desperate duo, and Putin would have just gobbled him up for breakfast. I mean, the whole thing's ludicrous. And also, I mean, if Harry's going to interview world leaders, surely he should be interviewing them about their accomplishments in the present and their aims for the future, not, oh, what did you suffer when you were 3 years old? Do tell me. I suffered. I was a prince. Can you believe it? Mummy died when I was 2 weeks short of my 13th birthday. I had to walk behind the coffin. Oh, my life has been so terrible. I mean, much worse than all those starving masses in the rest of the world. The guy's nuts. I mean, he's delusional.
It's really interesting, Phil Dampier, isn't it, though? Because clearly Harry and Meghan believed that their little black book was so bulging that all of their mates, right, all of their famous mates were going to be prepared to bail them out financially. But actually, no one wanted to be associated with them. I mean, certainly not, you know, Zuckerberg and Putin and the Pope. That's pie in the sky stuff. But Phil, not even the Obamas, not even Taylor Swift, because these Hollywood people don't want to be associated now with a brand that is so toxic, because it's a brand that has been created of trying to destroy the British royal family, which actually, on the whole, American celebrities are desperate to be a part of.
Well, if he played his cards right and he hadn't fallen out with them, the best interviews he could have got would have been with his father and his brother, wouldn't it? I mean, the Queen never gave an interview in her entire life, in her entire reign. Everyone from Michael Parkinson to Barbara Walters.
Actually, Phil, I mean, you know, maybe if he hadn't have treated the Queen and the family so badly, maybe the Queen herself, the late Queen herself, would even have agreed, you know. But that was never going to happen with the way he exited.
No, she played along with a couple of his podcasts, so that's what he should have done. But, of course, he's mucked it up. But I agree with Lady C. I mean, the idea that him interviewing Vladimir Putin or Donald Trump or the Pope, I mean, it would have been pure box office gold, wouldn't it? It would have been absolutely incredible. Everyone would have tuned in their millions to watch it. But I don't think he was quite in the John Freeman League, Prince Harry. Younger viewers probably don't know who he was, but he was a guy who interviewed people in the 60s and really got into their heads. And I'm not sure that he quite has the intellect to do that. But so it was a non-starter.
Well, no, of course, because 3 years and the bloke could not come up with one podcast idea. And you know what? Spotify, they tried so hard. They even spent millions to build a studio. They actually constructed a studio within these guys' mansions. They didn't even need to leave the house in order to conduct their work. Yet they still didn't do the work. I mean, it really is pathetic. But look, I want to move on because Lady Susan Hussey, very much back in the royal fold now. She was spotted in the royal box at Ascot alongside Queen Camilla and King Charles. The former lady-in-waiting to Queen Elizabeth II was, of course, forced to resign from royal duties in the wake of this race row less than 6 months ago. She was at the King's coronation, though. So do you think, Lady C, now that clearly the royal family is saying Lady Hussey did nothing wrong, which you said publicly at the time, I said publicly at the time, do you think she needs an apology for the way she was treated over Ngazi Fulani?
Oh, I don't think she wants an apology. You know, she's loyal. She is the ultimate courtier. She is a wonderful woman. She doesn't want an apology. She wants this subject to be dead and buried and move on. She fell on her sword. She committed the ultimate sacrifice. And she is still, as you said, that she would be in the royal fold still. She still is. She's always going to be. I think from her point of view, the best thing we could do where she's concerned is not ask for an apology. She doesn't want an apology. She wants the story to move on, and maybe you and I and everybody else can celebrate the fact that Ngozi Fulani, otherwise known as Marlene Henry, is out of a
She
job.
wasn't there.
And
She wasn't there, thank goodness. Lady Colin Campbell, Phil Dampier, my royal masterminds, thank you both so much. We'll speak later in the week. But coming up, as the investigation into Nicola Bulley's tragic death found she drowned but was alive and sober when she was thrown into the water, former top detective Mark Williams-Thomas, who was at the inquest today, gives his expert verdict. But next, as a Scottish pupil tells teachers they now identify as a fox, amid warnings from union leaders that schools are a toxic environment for educators, is it time for the government to fight harder against sexual extremism in our schools? My superstar panel will debate that shortly, plus a first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages, hot off the press. Don't go anywhere, we're back in just 2 minutes' time.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
It's 10 p.m. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, we've had cats, dinosaurs, even the moon. But now a child in Scotland has come into a classroom identifying as a fox. So do governments north and south of the border need to act now and ban the gender madness sweeping through our classrooms? That's the big debate with my superstar panel next. And tonight, I'm joined by the former Education Minister Andrea Jenkins to give her insight, alongside Benjamin Butterworth and Belinda de Lucy. As a damning Wall Street Journal expose reveals that Taylor Swift declined a handwritten invite from Meghan Markle to appear on her podcast, has the Duchess proven to be a Hollywood flop? And should Harry be embarrassed by Bloomberg's revelation that he wanted to interview Putin, yes, Putin, about childhood trauma? I'll be asking if the Sussexes have any credibility left in the media buzz. Also coming up, the inquest into Nicola Bulley's tragic and mysterious death opened today, as it was revealed that the mother of two was sober when she died of drowning. But amid fresh criticism of the police's handling of the case, investigative journalist and former police officer Mark Williams-Thomas, who attended the inquest today, joins me live to give his expert analysis. The Philip Schofield scandal continues to rock ITV, which is now searching for his replacement on Dancing on Ice. But is former Strictly star James Jordan right to warn that he shouldn't be replaced by a woman because, quote, we're going to see no white heterosexual men on TV anymore? Fleet Street icon Calvin McKenzie responds in Uncancelled. Meanwhile, thanks to one SNP councillor, the mask clip for Scottish nationalism at the weekend.
I am originally, as you might be able to tell, from that place. I'm English by birth, I'm Scottish by choice.
I'll bring you that and much more from the SNP's totally chaotic separatist convention, including Humza Useless confronting a heckler. Oh, it went wrong. It went very, very wrong. And finally, after Winston Churchill is branded a white supremacist for over a year by St Paul's Cathedral, will the wartime hero get the recognition he so fully deserves in tonight's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass? Stick around to find out. The first of tomorrow's newspaper front pages will arrive in mere moments too, right after the news headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Dan, thank you. The top story tonight is that the Russian President Vladimir Putin says the organisers of the attempted military coup at the weekend will be brought to justice. The Russian leader addressed the rebellion in a televised address ahead of a meeting with his security officials. In his speech, Putin thanked the Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko for a peaceful solution. The Kremlin leader blamed the West for the rebellion, saying it wanted Russian soldiers to kill each other. And it comes after the head of the Wagner mercenary group says he didn't want to overthrow Putin. Yevgeny Prigozhin said earlier that the progress of his troops highlighted serious security problems in the country. President Putin says an armed rebellion would have been suppressed in any case.
This civil solidarity has shown that any blackmail, any attempt to create internal turmoil is doomed to failure. I repeat, we saw the greatest consolidation of society, executive and legislative power at all levels. A firm, unambiguous position in support of the constitutional order was taken by public organisations, religious denominations, leading political parties.
Well, here the Foreign Secretary James cleverly said the rebellion has shown the world that Russia is not as strong as previously thought.
Prigozhin's rebellion is an unprecedented challenge to President Putin's authority, and it is clear that cracks are emerging in the Russian support for the war. I, of course, hold no candle for Prigozhin or his forces. They have committed atrocities in Ukraine and elsewhere, but he has said out loud what we have believed since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion, that this invasion was both unjustified and unprovoked.
Meanwhile, in news here at home, an inquest heard today how Nicola Bulley died as a result of drowning and that there was no evidence she'd been harmed. The mother of two disappeared in January while she was out walking her dog along the River Wyre in Lancashire. Her body was found 3 weeks later. Some experts say the river was just 4 degrees and inhaling just 2 breaths of water would have been lethal. The world's second largest cinema chain, Cineworld, has announced it'll file for administration in the UK. The move, set to take place next month, is part of a restructuring plan. Shareholders will be affected, but the company, which has more than 100 cinemas across the UK and Ireland, says their British ventures will continue to operate as normal. And the Prince of Wales today launched an initiative aimed at ending homelessness. Prince William's 5-year project, called Homewards, aims to make rough sleeping a thing of the past. Initially focusing on 6 locations, local businesses will be asked to develop their action plans with up to £500,000 in funding available. On TV, online, DAB+ radio and the TuneIn app. This is GB News.
Tomorrow's news tonight now in our Media Buzz. First front pages are in, hot off the press. And the Metro leads with the inquest into Nicola Bulley's death, which found that the mum of 2 was not murdered and was alive and sober when she entered the icy river. Top detective turned investigative journalist Mark Williams-Thomas, who attended the inquest today, is going to join me live with his expert verdict shortly. The Independent leads with the Home Office claim that Superwoman Suala's Rwanda plan will not stop the small boats, as an all-party committee rejects the, quote, harmful, impractical and costly proposals. My Superstar panel back with me now, making her debut on the Superstar panel tonight. Former Education Minister under Boris Johnson, Dame Andrea Jenkins, the journalist and broadcaster Benjamin Butterworth, and the former Brexit Party MEP Belinda de Lucy. Now, last week it emerged that a feline phenomenon had taken hold in British schools, with several pupils being allowed to identify as cats. But this gender madness has unsurprisingly sprung up in SNP-run Scotland as well, where a child has told their teacher, wait for it, that they identify as a fox. Union leaders, meanwhile, have been calling on governments north and south of the border for further clarity on how to deal with the public minefield of gender ID. But speaking today, Equalities Minister Kemi Badenoch claimed that Number 10's position was abundantly clear.
The government has a very clear policy on self-ID, which is that we don't agree with it. We think that it brings rights within the Equality Act into conflict, and the law as it stands works well in terms of maintaining that balance. And that's one of the reasons why I did write to Ofsted to make sure that they can look at what is going on in schools, and we will be releasing guidance shortly, which should also help schools follow the correct procedures.
However, many in the Conservative Party say the government is not doing nearly enough to combat extreme gender ideology sweeping through our schools. Now, Andrea Jenkins, you're, of course, a former education minister yourself.
Yes.
This is madness, right? We all agree kids should not be able to identify as foxes or dinosaurs or cats. I mean, this is actually like a sexual phenomenon called being a furry, I think, which is something adults do when they're adults. You know, this shouldn't be allowed in the classroom. The question is, Andrea, is your party doing enough now?
I don't think we are. We need to do far more. I mean, I raised it as an education minister, not about a fox. I wasn't even aware of that. But, I mean, children are children. When my little one was 3, he wanted to be a Teletubby. He's not going to grow up to be a Teletubby. You know, they've got amazing imaginations. But
And a teacher would be completely insane, right, if they said, oh, you can identify as Poe, or Tinky Winky. So surely it's the same thing, saying you can identify as a cat.
But it's bonkers. But also, I mean, let's be clear, Dan, this isn't just political extremism.
No.
To me, I think it's children being used as a social experiment by so-called progressive politics.
Yes.
We really must put an end to this, and every member of government should stand out. And what I find quite disturbing, Dan, is that it's been under a Conservative government, especially some of the sex education stuff's been allowed to happen and at such a young age.
Yes.
And so I would like to know, with the stuff what's come out this week with Gillian Keegan, you know, with the health and sexual education stuff what came out and through Parliament the last 3 years, which schools minister signed this off? Because they should, if it's the same ministers in government now, they should be nowhere near this, and there must be a reshuffle, put them in a different position, but do not let them near the Department for Education.
Very good point, because the thing is, Belinda de Lucy, this is highly sexual stuff. I mean, this is like, you know, fetishes and kinks getting into the classroom. How is this being allowed to happen?
You know, children look up to adults, depend on adults to protect them, to safeguard them, and this is being breached. I think a crime against children is being committed in our schools right now, without question, and I think people on my side of the argument that want to protect children from extreme ideologies and protect them from schools being used as vehicles to evangelise trans extremism or porn or anything like that, people on my side who want to ban it will be vindicated in the end, and those who are shoving this down our children's throat will be in the dock in a few years, because this is a crime, this is damaging children. To tell kids, if they don't fit a narrow sexist stereotype, that they're somehow wrong or born in the wrong body, instead of teaching children to love the bodies they're born in, no matter how feminine a male or butch a female you are. And there's all sorts of porn stuff coming into much younger, and it's getting younger and younger. And the Conservative government have been asleep at the wheel over this. They just need to say no, because children are depending on them and we are letting them down.
Benjamin Butterworth, are we letting down our children with this highly sexualised rubbish in classrooms?
I mean, first of all, you say you can't grow up to be a Teletubby, but I think with this outfit, I'm doing my best.
No!
Look, you know, the stuff that has emerged, the claims in the last 2 weeks about kids being cats or foxes, it is clearly absurd. You know, I don't believe it for a split second. I'm sure...
So you don't believe Catherine Birball's thing?
I'm sure...
the most respected head teachers?
No, I very rarely believe her. I think she's appalling. And, you know, there may well be kids saying that they like being animals like that, but in no more meaningful a way than they always have, right? And it is trying to put what is normal, silly, childish behaviour, like being a fox or a cat, into this issue. And the truth is that, you know, some of the suggestions that the government has made, that if the young person is explaining that they identify as another gender and the parents are aware of that, they should be allowed to do it. Who is the state to stop that? That is totally inappropriate.
They need to stop it, because socially...
I'd like to come in there.
Thank you, please.
Yeah, because I've got 2 constituents over the last 3 years where we've had, you know, the primary school children. The school wants to push the parents to actually accept that these young children are changing gender. But I went on the side of the parents. You know, the hormones are all over the place as children, and let them be children. I think, you know, if someone...
Are you not concerned that when you were a young lad at school, probably, and look, I don't want to make any assumptions, but maybe a little bit on the camp side, that in this day and age, you would have had some hard-left, woke teacher saying, put a dress on and become Benjamin.
No, what I had, and it wasn't even as bad as anybody a generation before, is teachers, adults telling me to man up, telling me I needed to do kung fu or be more masculine because somehow being gay wasn't acceptable.
But you were a man,
and
though.
the way that
you were a man.
Of course, and the way that trans people are talked about now is exactly like Section 28, that law that banned the talking about sexuality, about gay people in public areas such as schools.
No, but we're talking about affirming children, going into schools saying that, you know, social contagion is a massive thing in the trans movement at the moment. I've seen it. I've got 4 teenagers. I'm around teenagers all the time. I witness it all the time. It's cool to be non-binary. It's cool to be the other sex. And then having teachers and adults affirming that and saying to a child, you can socially transition. This has dire consequences. 19% of schools now have gotten rid of single-sex loos for girls because of this social transitioning in schools. Girls in Wales are staying at home when they've got their periods because they're too embarrassed now to go to schools. There's consequences to this, Benjamin.
It's that 50% of trans people have attempted to take their life, not just
Stop
contemplating
using that as a threat, so we all have to submit to it.
But the reason that happens is because, you know, any gay adult is going to tell you that they recognised it when they were young. Just about any trans adult is going to tell you that they recognised it when it was young. So why shouldn't we help those people?
No, because you don't get put on drugs when you're gay when you're young. You do when you say you're trans.
Also,
it's
surely
totally
it's
different.
there is a difference between sexuality.
It's just a complete nonsense. You know, you can't teach people to be trans. I learned about World War II at school, but I'm yet to invade Poland.
Totally different, Benjamin. Totally different.
OK, now, over the weekend, the SNP took a break from being questioned by Scottish police and gathered in Dundee for a convention on independence which proved to be just as chaotic as the party itself. First off, Humza Useless departed the stage mid-speech to confront a heckler and attempt to win her over, and you can imagine how that went.
That's OK, folks. Folks, let's not boo. I'll tell you what, folks. Let's not boo. I'm going to take a minute to talk to that person, everybody, because we are a party.
No, I don't want to stay here. You think I can stay here? No.
Then the mask slipped for the rabid separatists as SNP councillor Serena Cowdy was given rapturous applause for saying this.
I am originally, as you might be able to tell, from that place. I'm English by birth, I'm Scottish by choice.
Do you remember when Scheming Sturgeon, all that not long ago, called for parties to, quote, depolarise public debate in her shameless resignation speech? Well, the SNP clearly was not listening. Belinda Lucy, Benjamin Butterworth, Dame Andrea Jenkins do stand by, because coming up in the media buzz, as it's revealed that Harry and Meghan are floundering in Hollywood with Taylor Swift swerving Meghan Markle. Is their stateside brand now a write-off? My Superstar panel return to tackle that. Plus, we'll have more of tomorrow's newspaper front pages for you soon. But next, as day one of the inquest into Nicola Bulley's tragic death concludes, former detective and investigative journalist Mark Williams-Thomas joins me live to ask if the police still have questions to answer over their handling of the case. He's live next. Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides
the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think. Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now, the disappearance of Nicola Bulley gripped the nation back in January as Lancashire Police and private investigators spent over 3 weeks searching for the missing 45-year-old mother of 2 after she disappeared on a dog walk alongside the River Wyre.
We're never ever going to lose the hope, of course we're not. But right now, it is as though she has vanished into thin air.
As soon as she was reported missing, following the information that was provided to the police by her partner Paul, and based on a number of specific vulnerabilities that we were made aware of, Nicola was graded as high risk.
Now, Lancashire Police came under fire for revealing deeply personal details about Nicola to the public, including her, quote, significant issues with alcohol. That was before her body was pulled from the river 23 days after she first disappeared, with an inquest into her death commencing in Preston today. That inquest has heard that Nicola was alive and sober when she entered the water with no evidence to suggest she was harmed before tragically drowning. But the hearing has prompted fresh criticism of the police's handling of the case, with investigative journalist and former police officer Mark Williams-Thomas highlighting contradictions while attending. And I'm delighted to say that Mark joins me now live from Preston. So, Mark, after what you've heard today at the inquest, do Lancashire Police still have serious questions to answer over their handling of Nicola Bulley's disappearance?
Good evening, Dan. Yes, they do. I mean, let's be very clear that the inquest is a fact-finding exercise, that the coroner's purpose is to try to establish what happened to Nicola, not to criticise any parties involved. We heard today from the very significant witnesses. In fact, today was probably the most important day. We heard initially from the pathologist, the Home Office pathologist, whose determination was very clear that, as you said, Nikki fell into the water and she subsequently drowned. We then heard some evidence from the police officer in charge of the investigation, Detective Superintendent Smith, who gave an overview in terms of the timeline of what they believe Nicola was up to. But then we had some very significant evidence, firstly from the police diver. This is a police diver who went into the water and carried out what he considered to be some kind of test to see whether or not a body could float. Now, of course, he wasn't dead. There wasn't a test that was exactly the same situational conditions of Nicola. But what he said is that he believed she went in by the water, by the bench, and travelled downstream, pushed by the water to a position where her body eventually ended up being rescued. But the problem was contrary to that is the next three witnesses who gave their evidence, which was firstly initially two doctors, eminent doctors, who basically gave their view that the point to which Nikki went into the water, she would have been dead within a matter of seconds, and that's because of the shock from the water. And then we heard experts gave evidence who said that actually the point to which you go in a water, you're dead, you will sink. So it poses the question, if she went into the water at the bench and she died immediately and you sink, and we know that because evidence tells us that, how did she then travel some distance, round bends, past snagging on the ground and eventually over a weir to come to rest about 2 miles downstream? Doesn't quite add up.
No, absolutely intriguing. Also intriguing today, Mark, was the revelation that there was no alcohol in Nicola's body. And surely that does mean the police are going to struggle with their botched PR handling of this case, because you'll remember there was outrage over the fact that they publicly revealed Nicola's issues in the past with alcohol. Well, it doesn't seem to have played any part in her disappearance, Mark. So surely that adds weight to the critics of the police who said that that was being used almost as a diversionary tactic to take the focus off their botched handling of her disappearance.
Yeah, they made some major errors in terms of their PR handling, and I was very critical at the time, and I remain critical of Lancashire Police, who got it absolutely wrong. You know, they should have come out and apologised for doing what they did. They put it out there that Nikki was suffering from dependency on alcohol as a result of her menopause situation. We now know very clearly that the point at which she went into the water, there was no consumption of alcohol, there was no consumption of drugs. But I read in the meantime numerous people on social media who were saying she turned up drunk in the morning, she took the kids to school drunk. That was quite simply as a result of the police putting out there that that she was drinking. So very disappointing, really. And I think that the Lancashire Police should hold their head in shame, certainly in relation to that aspect. They got that completely wrong. They should never have released that information. I have been critical of the police. Let's be very clear. We do now know some answers for the family. We know that she died as a result of drowning. We know that the time of which she died is most probably after 9:18, but before 9:30. So that was around the time that we died, and most probably at a point of 9:22, which was when there was a spike on her Fitbit. So we know that with certain certainty, and you can't change that because those are fixed data pieces of information.
Mark, an incredibly difficult day for Nicola's family and friends. I believe her husband was at the inquest today. Is that right? And how were they coping?
Yeah, Paul was in the gallery whilst he was there listening to everything, as was Nikki's sister and family and parents. They suffered, over the past months, in a way that none of us will be able to understand unless they've been through it. And they suffered again today. They were visibly disturbed when some of the detail came out.
Mark Williams-Thomas reporting on the Nicola Bulley inquest. Thank you so much. Now, coming up in Uncancelled, amid reports ITV is considering replacing Philip Schofield with a female presenter on Dancing on Ice. Is former Strictly Come Dancing star James Jordan right to warn that white, straight men are being driven off our screens? Fleet Street legend Calvin McKenzie live in the studio on that soon. But next, in the media buzz, as the Wall Street Journal exposes the humiliating truth behind the shameless Sussexes' failure in Hollywood, will any other brands dare touch them now? My superstar panel weigh in. Plus, more of tomorrow's newspaper front pages hot off the press straight after the break.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But
and action.
Sergeant Reed, my superstar panel, they're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News. Britain's watching.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Time to return to tomorrow's News Tonight in the Media Buzz. More front pages are in. The Eye reports that Vladimir Putin will punish Wagner mutineers, but the mercenaries chief, Yevgeny Prigozhin, says the uprising highlights serious problems with Russia's security. The Daily Star leads with a word of warning from the ex-head of the CIA to the man who betrayed Putin over the weekend, advising Prigozhin that he'd best stay away from open windows. More on the Media Buzz now with tonight's superstar panel, Dame Andrea Jenkins, the former Education Minister, the journalist and broadcaster Benjamin Butterworth, and political commentator Belinda de Lucy. Now, a damning Wall Street Journal expose has laid bare the Sussexes' long list of Hollywood failings. According to the newspaper, pop megastar Taylor Swift rejected Meghan Markle's desperate personal handwritten letter to appear on her awful podcast Archetypes. Swift actually responded via a representative, which is like the ultimate diss. After losing their $20 million deal with Spotify last week, there's also growing speculation that Netflix could be the next company to drop Harry and Meghan. As I write for a new column on the Mail Online tonight, we have learned just how ill-equipped the couple were for a real job that required hard graft, imagination and strong working relationships. It's also become obvious how the pair's little black book of contacts they were convinced would pull through for them in their moment of financial need is far thinner than they ever wanted to believe. Meanwhile, Bloomberg has exposed Harry's farcical attempt at his own podcast, which never happened, which had Spotify bemused at the Duke's impossible to deliver ideas. These included interviewing Vladimir Putin about his childhood trauma and talking to the Pope. So, Belinda de Lucy, this is an utter commercial disaster. Their track record was actually farcical. You know, in 3 years, Harry had all of these crazy ideas but couldn't deliver one podcast. So how on earth are they going to pay for this mansion? Because surely no company's going to want to work with them after this.
And what a burn from Taylor Swift. I mean, my gosh, she's suddenly gone up in my estimations. You know, I'm actually beginning to feel a bit for them because they're so farcical now. And 3 years ago, they were were treated with more reverence than Mother Teresa. And now they're just the butt of people's jokes. And when they touch things, it gets laughs now rather than respect. So I'm not surprised people are not wanting to go near them. But especially, they aren't grafters. I doubt either of them would know a really hard day's work at the bottom of the rung, you know, if it slapped them in the face. And they're coming across as sort of a bad spectre to have around projects. People, they're content deficient. All they have is their whinging and their bombshells. There's nothing else to them. There's nothing really substantial about anything they say anymore because they've hung everyone out to dry already. So I just think that it's sort of game over. I would go away and hide for a few years if I was them.
Well, Dame Andrea Jenkins, what I find so fascinating is they clearly believed that their attacks on the royal family was going to make them really popular with the woke brigade.
Absolutely.
But the thing that they forgot is that actually American celebrities are very enamoured with our royal family. So you take the example of Taylor Swift, who didn't even bother replying to Meghan's handwritten note, and I bet she did it in all of her awful calligraphy. Didn't even bother sending a response. She just got her PR rep to call her up. Now, what's fascinating about that? Taylor Swift, right, she's actually quite an Anglophile. She likes Prince William. She respects the royal family. The Obamas and Oprah don't even want to publicly associate with the Sussexes anymore. So actually, their toxic attacks on the royal family that they thought were going to make them so popular has meant that no one famous really wants to be publicly associated with them now.
Completely, and we know a lot of the Americans love the royal family. But it's also the hypocrisy, Dan, what gets to me. You know, they left the UK complaining about the media. Now they're caught in the media for financial gain as a money-making machine. And, I mean, who in the right mind would want to interview Putin? And for me, you know, this is a royal equivalent.
His childhood trauma.
This is a royal equivalent of hug a dictator. It's just bonkers to me. I think Harry needs to go home, serve his country just like his brother's doing.
But you think they're going to keep getting these deals, Benjamin? Is that because your woke army are so ludicrous and have too much money to spend? Because you sign these people up, you're going to get no content, you're going to get no product, you're going to get lots of toxicity attracted to your brand. Why on earth would a company want to be associated with this car crash?
Because they're two of the most, if not the most, talked about people in the world.
For all the wrong reasons.
You know, Meghan Markle was the most Googled person on the planet only a couple of years ago.
For all the wrong reasons.
And so, isn't Putin the most Googled person at the moment?
Well, I think it's Andrew Tate, so it's a collection of awful people.
Yeah, I was going to say.
But look, you know, there was a huge interest in them. I think that when you talk about them not having any substance to them, look, I think there might be an element of truth to that Meghan Markle. It's pretty humiliating that Taylor Swift has the time to cavort with Denise Welch's son, but not with Meghan Markle. That is a celebrity hierarchy I wouldn't want to be below. But I think Prince Harry, you know, this is a man that served his country, that fought in Afghanistan, that's been through an extraordinary life, and I think there's a great deal to respect about him.
OK, well, he was paid $20 million by Spotify, right? He's no longer a member of the royal family. He was paid that amount of money but could not deliver one podcast. That says a lot about his brain power and about his work ethic, and I think actually about a narcissistic arrogance that runs through him. Don't you think he believes that he is just entitled to money without putting in the work? Well, actually, mate, out here in the real world, we don't get paid for doing nothing. We don't get paid simply for turning up. You have to deliver.
No, I think Prince Harry, you know, I'm sure if he produced a podcast, and there were going to be lots of companies that will want to snap Harry and Meghan up, that I would definitely listen to a Harry podcast. Don't tell me you wouldn't. And actually, I disagree. You know,
if it's anything like his book, though.
Well, his book was explosive. You know, I never imagined I'd know about Prince Harry's penis, and yet here we are. We know so much.
There's not much more of him to divulge. Like, we've heard everything. What else is he going to say?
He could serve a really important role as a sort of cultural ambassador for Britain.
Ooh,
because
no
I think that's what Prince Harry can do. No.
Are you kidding me? Have you not worked this out yet? He's bad news. He's even turned off the woke Americans. Taylor Swift and Oprah and the Obamas want nothing to do with this guy. He's bad news for Britain.
And I don't think he represents the British sense of duty and service and honesty and respect. He's the opposite of those things.
Well, you know, I respect veterans, Belinda, so, you know,
I do
that's
too,
why I like
but
Harry.
not when they have a little meltdown and have to escape their family and run away crying.
But, you know, I don't think we necessarily want to ask Putin about his childhood trauma, because that would be clearly absurd. But actually...
Well, that's what Harry wanted.
Someone that can hold some of these major global figures to account, that can reveal more about them.
Oh, you think Prince Harry
that
could
would be a
hold
good
major
thing.
global figures to account, do you?
Can we just try
I think that when he
I'd
exists
love
on
to
that
see it,
level,
yeah.
when he understands what it's like to be in that world in a way that very, very few people do,
well, as
I think we should.
There's just a huge arrogance. Spotify spent millions building this couple a studio in their home. So, guys, they didn't even have to leave the front door. They could have done all of their work from their own home. They still couldn't be bothered. I mean, they deserve to lose this deal. And you know what I'm told? Netflix want out too. They want to end this relationship with Harry and Meghan as soon as possible. Benjamin, final word.
Well, look, they had to do it from their home because they face such security risks, and you don't even want us to protect them when they visit this country. So I think good for them.
They've got the money to protect themselves if they choose to. Now, sticking with the royal theme, the Duchess of York, Sarah Ferguson, has been enjoying time back in the spotlight recently, having launched her own podcast, something Harry could never do, called Tea Talks, as well as going on a stateside book tour to promote her latest novel, A Most Intriguing Lady. But in a brand new episode released today, Fergie made a shocking announcement: her bombshell diagnosis with breast cancer.
We're actually taping the podcast today, but tomorrow, it's because tomorrow I'm going in for a mastectomy. And not a single mastectomy, but it's very important that I speak about it. My sister from Australia said, Sarah, you know, get on with it. She was right.
Was it a routine test you were having?
Yeah, it was after bank holiday. I want every single person that is listening to this podcast to go get checked, go get screened.
Now, that mastectomy took place last week, leaving the Duchess recovering in Windsor, actually at the Grace and Favour home that she shares with Prince Andrew. And I have to say, from all of us here, we wish Fergie a very speedy recovery. I think she's right. It was a really important thing to talk about, actually, and to do it in a podcast. Just imagine what Harry could have done if he had a podcast like that. Belinda Lucy, Benjamin Butterworth, Dame Andrea Jenkins. Do stand by, because coming up, as Prince William unveils his ambitious plans to end homelessness in the UK, while Harry pitches a podcast where he interviews Vladimir Putin, as we just heard, only one of the estranged brothers seems to be living in the real world. So who will emerge victor as we crown tonight's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass? But next in Uncancelled, amid reports ITV is considering replacing Philip Schofield with a female presenter on Dancing on Ice, possibly Jane McDonald. Is former Strictly Come Dancing star James Jordan right to warn that white men are being driven off our screens? Plus, has the BBC shown its anti-Tory bias after Ben Elton's vicious attack on the PM? On Laura Koonsberg's show at the weekend, well, Calvin McKenzie is going to get his teeth stuck into both of these stories. He's live, so don't go anywhere, in just 2 minutes' time.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
It's time now for Uncancelled. And this is where Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. Now, after Philip Schofield's sensational act scene from ITV, the broadcaster is on the hunt for his replacement both on This Morning and Dancing on Ice. And if woke ITV bosses have their way, Schof will be replaced on the figure skating contest by a woman, with the Sunday Mirror revealing that Jane McDonald is the front-runner to host the show with Holly Willoughby. But former Strictly Come Dancing star James Jordan has slammed the broadcaster, warning, stop trying to tick boxes all the time. I like to see men present as well, otherwise we're going to see no white heterosexual men on TV anymore. Well, I'm delighted to say we've got one of the few of them left on television. Calvin McKenzie.
Pleased to meet you, Dan. How's it going?
James Jordan is right, though, isn't he? There is actually an active move to get as many white, straight, old men off the box. Let's just be honest about it. It's happening.
Yes, and you're going to see more of it as well. It is a nightmare, and it's not only in show business. Anybody of a certain age, if you're in your 40s and you're white and male, the chances of getting another job are very, very small these days. So television is ahead of the curve on this, but there is virtually nothing that can be done about it. And that's why I imagine so many people are becoming trans. They're looking for job opportunities.
Isn't it also the case that when there is a controversial replacement, the bosses in particular think that a female will provide them with less drama? So I look to, for example, Piers Morgan leaving Good Morning...
Jeremy Kyle.
Jeremy Kyle. You know, there's been Bruce Forsyth when he left Strictly Come Dancing as well. He was replaced with a woman.
Yes, I think that they think that they're more manageable and more acceptable. And actually, the other
less likely to maybe be scandalous.
I totally agree that there is no suggestion of any sexual interest in any direction, and I'm afraid that is that. We're done for. So if you're a male in show business right now, you'd be enormously concerned about what does your future actually look like. And I would say it looks pretty poor, to be frank.
Do you think Holly Willoughby, though, will work presenting alongside a woman like Jane McDonald? Because it certainly didn't work on the first day that she returned to screens after Philip Schofield's departure, where she was paired with Josie Gibson. It felt like a very odd combination.
Yes, I think if you have two strong women in the same way as if you had Kyle and Piers next to each other, that wouldn't work either. Why they just don't go for the rather straightforward idea of a decent bloke and a decent woman, and I have no idea. But they definitely want to totally avoid anything going on of a rather difficult nature.
So you could see a situation where Jane McDonald maybe replaces Philip Schofield on Dancing on Ice, and maybe on This Morning it's Alison Hammond.
It could be anything, and it will happen right across all the news providers. You look at it in 20 years' time, there won't be a bloke to be found. Okay. And it's painful if you're an ambitious, creative man. I think you should keep slightly clear of show business, to be honest.
Now look, Calvin, the BBC once again embroiled in an impartiality row. This time it's under fire after its political presenter, Laura Kuenssberg, gave lefty comedian Ben Elton a free platform on her flagship Sunday morning show to launch what was a scathing, I think actually slightly unhinged, attack on Rishi Sunak. Watch this.
It's depressed, it's sad. I mean, if anybody was still watching after that extraordinary Orwellian, meaningless, evasive word salad, I mean, everybody else wanted to believe, and I sort of believe maybe he's kind of a bit more decent, and it turns out he's as much of a mendacious, narcissistic sociopath as his previous boss.
I mean, Calvin McKenzie, this is extraordinary stuff. Remember, on the first episode of that show, they purposely hired the left-wing comedian Joe Lycett to humiliate the then Prime Minister Liz Truss. They secure an interview with Sunak. They then get another lefty comedian in the form of Ben Elton to do just that. And there was no pushback, by the way. She didn't say, no, where's your proof that Sunak is a sociopath?
I totally agree. Right, so Ben Elton, of course, had a long history. Those of us who are as old as I am, right, remember he made an entire career in the 80s attacking Thatcher on Channel 4. Right, but where's he been this last 20-odd years? 2 decades. He lives in Fremantle, Australia. He has an Australian passport. What on earth was he doing on there? And he hadn't just thought about this. He knew who was going to come on. He knew what the line of response by Rishi was going to be. So he thought up words like sociopath, mendacious and narcissistic, right? And everybody, oh, yes, that's quite right. Actually, had that been Boris, for instance, I think everybody would say, yeah, that's what we find him attractive. Rishi is the opposite end of that. No, that Ben Elton thing, the Kuenssberg show hasn't been doing well. It hasn't been making headlines. So, strangely enough, the BBC will be pleased with this. What I object to is nobody took them to task about it. And secondly, I'm forced to pay for this crap. I'm forced to pay for Ben Elton to go on there. I have to have this as part of my package. And if I don't have it, I'm off to jail. It is a ridiculous circumstance. And thank God GB News adds some bloody balance to it all.
What's Kuenssberg thinking? Because she's completely undermining her credibility as a so-called impartial presenter.
Well, I'm not sure there's much impartiality with Kuenssberg. I mean, after all, I can remember when Brown was in charge, she was virtually an unpaid PR when she was the political editor of the BBC. No, you cannot get preferment at the BBC if you are centre or centre-right. It's over. So you might as well do the opposite. But after all, it wasn't her decision to put Ben Elton on there. It was the editor or some two-pop producer.
She could say no.
She could say no.
And she also could have provided balance, and she didn't.
No.
And she didn't seek balance.
No, she didn't.
After what was a quite frankly unhinged attack.
But he didn't,
based on nothing, by the way.
He did,
based on absolutely nothing.
No, he didn't.
I'm no fan of Sunak either, as you know.
He just look. He had planned all this in advance. He'd worked out the script. Right, it was almost like a headline. He knew what he was doing. And why doesn't he just bugger off back to Australia?
Yeah, that was 100% scripted.
It was.
I totally agree with you. It was a plan. Now, whether the BBC actually had insight into that plan, we don't know. But they must have had some idea of what he was going to do.
Well, that's what he was
after Joe Lycett.
Yeah, that's what he was doing on there. This wasn't a surprise. If he'd come at the end of it and said, do you know, I quite like that guy, Rishi, compared to Boris or to Liv Truss, I'm in favour of him. Yeah. That would have been a great thumbs down.
And by the way, we know why this is extraordinary, because following my show, there's this great show called Headliners, which features some lefty comics, but also some brilliant right-wing comedians who exist in this country. Whether they'd define themselves as that, I don't know. But, you know, the likes of Nick Dinson and Leo Kearse and Andrew Doyle. And I can bet you those folk would never be invited onto Laura Coon's book. And if they ever were, there would be absolute outrage over it.
There would. Yeah.
And this, of course, follows that atrocity of Question Time and Fiona Bruce on Thursday night, where she was just desperately looking out at the audience all the time saying,
That's true.
Find me a Brexiteer who hates Brexit.
That is true, but nevertheless, you must have been as surprised as I was at how the Brexit argument got a round of applause there. I wondered whether something had gone wrong with the BBC audience picker. I bet that person got fired afterwards.
Or maybe Brexit's just not as bad as the BBC like to think. Calvin Mackenzie, but look, BBC spokesman, did tell us we feature a wide range of guests and opinions across the series and ensure we meet our due impartiality commitments. Time now to reveal tonight's Greatest Briton and Union Jackass. Dame Andrea Jenkins, who are you nominating as your Greatest Briton tonight?
It's got to be the heroic Winston Churchill, Dan, who helped save, Western civilization from the clasp of the Nazis.
Of course, but according to St Paul's Cathedral, which hosted his state funeral, he's just a white supremacist, Andrea Jenkins. Benjamin Butterworth, your nominee.
Well, my thoughts with Ant and Dec. Now you've claimed there are no straight white men on television. But my Greatest Briton is Sir Elton John, who gave an utterly legendary performance at Glastonbury last night. To be 76 and still in fine form, we should be so proud of that man's legacy and the influence on British music.
Belinda de Lucy, your Greatest Briton nominee.
My Greatest Briton is Prince William. Yes, the grown-up prince, and his project that he launched to try and eradicate homelessness. It's the duty and the service of a proper prince. And I take my hat off to him for getting his hands into the business and helping.
Well, look, I'm actually going to go with Dame Andrea Jenkins and Winston Churchill. This is after the despicable attempt by St Paul's Cathedral to woke-wash the legacy of probably the greatest Briton we've ever had. Andrea Jenkins, who's your Union Jackass nominee?
I'd say the Department for Education and the Minister who's signed off all this woke fest of things that are coming out at the moment, Dan.
Yeah, good choice. Benjamin Butterworth, your Union Jackass nominee?
All right, after everything I said, it still has to be Prince Harry for my Jackass. For the idea that you should interview Putin about childhood trauma. What next? Cooking with the Wagner Group. It's silly.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. And Belinda de Lucy, your nominee?
It's Tory Minister Lucy Fraser. Oh, my God, for coming out and saying it's time for a female lead as a James Bond. Oh, my eyes. It would barely fill a cinema. Women, what an insult to women. We've got our own ideas. If we want a female James Bond, we'll write the story ourselves and not hijack, a male character. Long live a hot alpha male flawed James Bond. Never a woman.
I'm right here, Belinda.
Let's have a listen to what Lucy Fraser had to say.
Is it time for a female James Bond?
Always time for females to lead in film and more broadly.
Andrea Jenkins, as a former minister, what on earth is a Tory culture secretary doing making a comment like that? I mean, I wasn't so surprised when it was Slippery Starmer saying it, but what is with the social engineering of some of these Conservatives these days?
We also had Victoria Atkins about 3 or 4 years ago saying that there should be Fireman Sam should be a woman. This has been going on for a while, unfortunately. I did publicly call her out. This is just crazy.
Benjamin Butterworth, even you must agree James Bond has to stay a bloke, right?
I think I should be the next James Bond. I get a strong feeling that that's what people would want. Look, I mean, it's not going to be a woman, but could it be a gay man? Could it be a black man? I think those are good ideas.
Why? Why?
Because the world changes and, heroes come in different...
No, so write their own stories.
James
Why
Bond's a big shagger of women, Why don't you create your own gay superhero?
Exactly.
I just don't understand.
I'm starting the campaign for a bisexual Bond in that case.
Oh, good luck with ratings and viewers.
God, OK. There we go. Look, I'm actually going to go with Benjamin Butterworth, though, because Prince Harry is today's Union Jackass after being exposed for taking 20 million from Spotify, 100 million from Netflix and doing no work, apart from coming up with a completely mad idea to interview Vladimir Putin about childhood trauma. Dame Andrea Jenkins, Benjamin Butterworth, Belinda de Lucy, my superstar panel this Monday night. I'm back again tomorrow from 9 p.m. Do join us. We've got Nigel Farage and Megyn Kelly. Next up, though, it's Headliners. Good night. Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views, and often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians